Hi there, my name's James Kelly and welcome back to Scot Goes Pop. In the spring of 2020, just after Alex Salmond was acquitted at his trial, he phoned me up, and that was just one of several phone calls that I had with him over the years, but it was by far the longest. I think it went on for like an hour and a half or something like that, if not longer. And in it, he gave me the detailed explanation of his side of the story of how he came to be put on trial and all the circumstances surrounding it. So why was he bothering to have long phone conversations with the likes of me? Well, I was just one of like a large number of pro-independence bloggers and pro-independence new media people who he was contacting in this way. I think he had a mind to setting up a party, a new party, and he thought if he had the blogosphere and the new media behind him as much as possible, that would give the new party the best possible start. In the phone call, he gave me the name of the person who he alleged was responsible for the leak to the Daily Record of the outcome of the Scottish Government investigation into him. And he also said that same person was largely responsible for what he regarded as the conspiracy against him to put him in prison. Now, that person was not Nicola Sturgeon. It was someone very close to Nicola Sturgeon. I'm sure you know who that person is, but I won't say the name just to be on the safe side. Now, since that conversation, it's likely that I was effectively betrayed by Mr Salmond because although my expulsion from the Alba party happened just after he died, the process was well and trained before he died, and given that one of the four people on the disciplinary committee who voted in favour of my expulsion was his own niece, Christina Hendry, I think it's pretty much inconceivable that he didn't sign off on my expulsion before he died. And if he did so, okay, it was probably from the information that was leaked to me from the NEC, it was probably under pressure from Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh, who was the real leader of the Alba party. But nevertheless, you know, he was his own man. He could have said no if he wanted to, and it seems that he did not say no to her, and he just allowed the process against me to continue, knowing it was likely to lead to my expulsion, or that it was certain to lead to my expulsion. Nevertheless, in spite of all that, I think back to that conversation I had with him in 2020, the level of detail he went into, and I must say, I do still broadly believe the account he gave me, and I do think in particular, the name he gave me of the leaker to the Daily Record was probably accurate, and you can see from what David Clegg has said that he was certainly trying to make clear, probably his conscience was bothering him. He was trying to make clear that Nicola Sturgeon's new claim that it may have been Alex Salmond himself who leaked it. Obviously, David Clegg knows that isn't true, and he wanted to make clear that it wasn't true without giving the identity of the real leaker, and he's pretending he can't he doesn't know or can't remember who that person is. I think it's pretty likely he knows who that person is. I think it's pretty likely that person is who Alex Salmond told me it was. And if it is that person, then Nicola Sturgeon would have undoubtedly have known about it, and for her to make this allegation that it might have been Alex Salmond must be an intentional sort of muddying of the waters, which is very disappointing. Because as Gerry Hassan has said, what we really need now is to move on from the war between Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon, and between Alex Salmond supporters and Nicola Sturgeon supporters. It is just completely toxic on both sides. And the only way forward for the independence movement is just to move on from it. If people very close to Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon want to continue with this battle, then let them do it on a sort of personal basis. But the independence movement has got to move away from that and let those people get on with it. And if what Alex Salmond told me in the broader sense was true, that the person who leaked the information to the Daily Record was also responsible for effectively a conspiracy to try and get him put into prison, and it just shows you how the feud between Salmond and Sturgeon and their respective camps has lost all sense of reason on all sides. Because if you think about it, to try and conspire to put your former party leader in prison, at the point that you do that, if you do it, then you must know that there's a high risk that is going to cause extreme damage, not only to the independence movement, but to the SNP as a party. If you think back to the precedent of Jeremy Thorpe, you know, although Jeremy Thorpe resigned as Liberal leader after the allegations were made against him of criminal activity. And although several years elapsed, it still caused damage to the Liberal Party at the 1979 general election. So it would have been reasonable to assume that the same thing was going to happen to the SNP. So not only did these people not care about the damage to the independence movement, they didn't even care about what everybody alleges that they care about, which is the best interests of the SNP. They had just lost all sense of reason because harming Alex Salmond apparently mattered more to them than the best interests of the SNP. But of course, there's a loss of reason on the other side as well, on the Alba side, because Alba is a party posing as a real independence party, as a party designed to push for independence in the way that the SNP are not, but in fact is more of a revenge vehicle against Nicola Sturgeon. The whole thing is just toxic, and we desperately need to move on from it. And as I've said before, a great opportunity was missed at the 2023 SNP leadership election because, from what I've heard, if Kate Forbes had won, and she very nearly did, Alex Salmond would have rejoined the SNP. Alba would essentially have been disbanded, and the whole sort of Berlin Wall and the independence movement would have come down, and we could have just moved forward in a degree of harmony. So it's such a terrible shame that never happened. The other thing that Nicola Sturgeon said in her memoir that I've seen really offend one or two people is her idea that in 20 years' time, Scotland will be independent, but it will be part of a confederation of British Isles countries, I think she calls it, involving an independent Scotland, a united Ireland, plus some sort of remnant of the UK that involves England, plus a Wales which is not independent, but has a much higher level of autonomy. And it's comments like that almost designed to offend the maximum number of people possible. Who is not going to be offended by that? Because independence in Scotland, independent supporters in Scotland may not like the idea of any sort of confederation with the other British countries, as she calls them. Obviously, unionists in Northern Ireland are going to be livid about any suggestion that there's going to be a united Ireland. But people in the Republic of Ireland will be offended by any suggestion that, well, first of all, that there's a concept called the British Isles. They do not recognise that name. And also that Ireland would want to be involved in some kind of British confederation, whereas in fact Ireland has a long history of distancing itself from Britain as much as possible. It doesn't even want to be a member of the Commonwealth. It never has done. And people in Wales, her former colleagues and, well, her present colleagues, in fact, in the SNP sister party, Plaid Cymru, might not like the idea that Wales will fail to get full independence. I don't know how realistic this vision of 20 years' time is. I think that she may be overestimating the chances of a united Ireland because although demography is on the side of the, what you might call the Catholic community, that doesn't necessarily translate into votes in favour of a united Ireland at a referendum, because you can see from opinion polls that there's a gap in support. It's almost like the reverse of what's happening in Scotland. There's a difference between the people who will vote for nationalist parties and the people who would vote hypothetically for a united Ireland at a referendum. And in the case of Northern Ireland, the support for united Ireland is actually lower than the support for nationalist parties. There are people who would sort of cross-vote. They would vote for nationalist parties in an election, but they would vote to remain part of the UK at a referendum. Now, I think there's an arguable case that because there is such a close association between the nationalist community and nationalist parties, that if you went into a referendum with nationalist parties and the leaders of those parties making a clear recommendation to vote for United Ireland, that those cross-voters might come back home, so to speak, and might actually vote for United Ireland. And that might produce a majority for a united Ireland, but that's a completely untested theory at this point. But I really can't see a united Ireland being involved in some sort of British confederation because that would conflict with Ireland's commitment, which is rock solid to the European Union, unless the British Confederation was a very sort of weak in nature and wasn't very extensive. It was effectively just window dressing. Or, of course, unless Britain rejoined the European Union, then that would make it more possible, but I don't think that's likely to happen. Similarly, although I don't think, there's no sort of suggestion of a betrayal in saying that Scotland might be part of a larger confederation after independence. That's not inconsistent with independence, because a confederation implies that you are an independent state, that you are a sovereign actor. So it is still independence. Nevertheless, surely the priority of Scotland is going to be to get back into the European Union, and that would preclude any genuine confederation with what remains of the UK. On the subject of Wales, she may have a fair point, even though people don't want to hear that, because there's such a large chunk, a large minority, but a very significant minority of the Welsh population, which is essentially anglicised, either because they are literally immigrants from England who barely even know that they're in Wales, who just carry on thinking that they're in England, or because there were parts of Wales that were anglicised, have been anglicised for a long time. Anyway, it's hard to see how you would ever get to an outright majority for independence, and the best that may be possible would be some kind of national compromise that would result in greater autonomy within the UK. That's not something that I'm happy about, but I just really struggle to see where the arithmetic for independence in Wales will ever come from. What I do find a bit offensive about all of this is the idea that we have to wait 20 years to get to this point, because it was in 2016, which was 9 years ago, that Britain voted to leave the European Union, which was effectively inconsistent with the prospectus that the No campaign in the 2014 independence referendum put forward. As soon as there was going to be a withdrawal from the European Union, the 2014 decision should have been revisited. And the SNP promised to revisit it, and they didn't keep that promise under Nicola Sturgeon's watch, and subsequent leaders have similarly failed to keep that promise. And what should happen now is that on a remedial basis, that revisiting should take place as soon as humanly possible, but the SNP are not really committing themselves to that, except in this kind of window dressing way of the impossible plan of getting an SNP overall majority, which supposedly would make it impossible for the UK government to say no, but everybody knows that's pie in the sky stuff. So, yeah, I think there is some legitimacy to the criticisms that are being made of Nicola Sturgeon's vision, because it doesn't entirely tally with what she said and what she promised when she was still in office. So that's it for now, but if you're enjoying this content, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll see you later.